streaming on YouTube, then I'm okay. Yeah.
Everything should be there. I'm going to make you the host, and
Awesome.
I am going to, wait a minute, where'd you go? There you are. Okay, you're the host. Have a wonderful meeting, everybody. Nice to see you, Angela.
Nice to see you.
Thanks a lot, Barbara. Okay. Well, so note, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of open meeting law, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting, the Southborough Municipal Technology Committee, will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website and YouTube an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So we'll call the meeting to order at 7:04. We will, the first thing we'll do is jump into approval of minutes, and then we're immediately going to go over to the Southborough needs of the Southborough Historical Commission. So change the order. So let's start with the approval of minutes. Thank you, Larry, for putting those together. Let me pull those up for review. And let me share. Okay, so this was on the 9th of February, 2021. Approval of minutes. We discussed the technology budget, specifically the line item for local virtualization. We approved the consultant agreement. And then we had a good discussion with Sarah, Director of Youth Services, including some of the HIPAA requirements. And just things about printers and scanners, all which you have to be concerned about with HIPAA. Virtual meeting recordings. And finally, left off with the strategic tech plan, reviewing the latest draft. Any questions, comments? Any motions to amend? Any motions to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay, I second that. To move to approve as is without amendment. Go around to with individual approvals. Larry?
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
And likewise, also vote to approve without amendments. Thanks again, Larry, for doing that. Stop sharing, and let me promote. We have Mr. Leishan in the audience here. Hold on one second. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for having me. Please call me Michael, by the way. No one
Michael.
can pronounce my last name anyway.
Yeah, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's German, and it used to have a few other H's and N's. It's Weisshahn, which means white.
Weisshahn.
But
Weisshahn.
no one does anyway. And, you know, I answer to anything except son of a gun, as my grandfather used to say.
Okay.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for, talking to us. I won't take too much of your time because as I said, I have a hard stop on 7:30, but I don't think we'll need that much anyway. So we have two things to talk to you about. One would seem fairly simple, and one is actually really quite complicated. The fairly simple one is that the Historical Commission meets in the Southborough History Museum. And this building is actually connected to the townhouse by fiber optic cable. We have been trying for 2 years, actually the better part of 3, to get off this very expensive and very poor Spectrum service, which the Historical Commission is using half its budget for, and simply get hooked up onto the town internet. Now, I spoke with Tom LaFlamme about this on numerous occasions. They were always trying to fit us into some budget. Finally, the Historical Society, which I also lead, has volunteered to actually pay the costs of this. And he says this, and I'm reading from his email of October 5th, 2020. The cost associated with that change to the fiber network would be as follows: $1,850 to have the contractor resplice terminate the fiber optic cable that currently runs through the museum building. $1,200 for network equipment, including a new switch and wireless access point consistent with equipment in the rest of the network. This would need to be scheduled with the contractor as well as technology staff to configure and test. If we could get this done, we have the money. We're blowing out our budget. If we could just get this done. I don't know anything about the specifics of this, but I do know, having gone down to the basement, that the cable's there and it just needs someone to hook it up. So I'm hoping that you guys can kind of guide us through this process, or work with the new IT folks to try to do this. It's not been anyone's priority except ours, because it's half our budget. And we have a lot of other things to be doing with this. And it's just blowing needlessly $1,200 a year of town money out the window for a really crappy internet service, I will point out. Terrible upload speeds and whatever. Although I haven't used the townhouse internet, so I don't, we may not be going from bad to great, better. I don't know. But at least it'll be cheaper. So that,
Mike, we ask you questions about that. So
sure.
Tell us about the status of the equipment. Has there been procured a network switch in the basement? And
no, nothing's been done at all. I mean, we've got as far as this email, and I said, tell us what the exact equipment is. We'll go get it.
Yeah.
We'll pay for the contractor to come do it, or work for the town or whatever. But we don't know. We don't know precisely
what the equipment is. Okay.
So and Michael, you probably don't know the answer to this, but I'm asking it sort of rhetorically. Is this just a dedicated run of fiber that runs from the townhouse to the historical building?
Yeah, it's an AT&T fiber, buried cable. The reason it was
our fiber infrastructure? Is our fiber?
Yeah, so I think it is. So basically, the fiber that goes over to down 85 actually goes out the back of the townhouse, across the parking lot, heads north a little bit along that angle till it hits 85 and then down. So I think it ran right past the Historical Commission building. And I think maybe it sounds like they dropped a line in the building when they ran it past it.
They did, because at the time Parks and Recreation were there. So we have both phone connection and fiber optic cable connection. Parks and Recreation, that's not quite what they call it, a recreation department. I think that's the TV show. In any event, so it is there. It's clearly labeled in the basement. The folks that have taken a look at this very briefly said, yes, it is in fact there, so that I wasn't crazy. We just need some translation as to what this network equipment and switch and wireless access point is, what the specs are, where to buy it. We'll buy it, and just hire someone to, Hook it up.
So let me
It-
just push this a little bit further, and I'm sure nobody knows the answers to these, but in terms of where we're looking, if there's basically a pair of fiber, I mean, let's just speak at a high level. If there's a pair of fiber that runs from the townhouse to their building, why are we going through all of that trouble? Why don't we just, plug one into, there must be a switch port in the a free switch port somewhere in the townhouse,
I think there is.
and then
I think
run GigE over it and just terminate it at a GigE wireless access point in their building. I mean, it's not a big building, and be done with it. $1,200 switch for an 1800-year-old building. I mean, or 1800s building. I mean, it would be nice in the extreme, but it seems like a little bit of overkill for this particular.
the question is, I'm guessing putting an access point should cover the entire building, even if it terminates right where the fiber ends. Is that right?
That would be, I mean, I've only been in the building once, but it's not very large. I would assume that a modern access point would cover the whole building.
Well, to the limited knowledge I have, a little Spectrum router covers the whole building. So including the basement.
Yeah.
Whatever that little thing is there that you hook up to the cable seems to be doing a fine job. I believe it's less than 1,000 square feet, and it's all open plan. So there's very little obstruction. And as I say, there's perfect internet from the cable modem. I just would love to get rid of these people because it just irks me irritably to have to keep paying this bill every month. I mean, just go away, people. Anyway, so
yeah,
I
Larry,
have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I just, how would this work from a security standpoint? Would we be joining the Historical Society in with the local area network of the townhouse?
Most likely, this would be added. This access point would be managed by town IT, just like they are for managing other access points in other town buildings. And it would probably be, I'm guessing, there's multiple SSIDs for town. I think there's like employees. I think there's like maybe a printers or other devices, but there's also a guest. So
one of the things to look at, depending on how this building is being used, is simply make this an extension of the guest network. And that way we really don't have any major security issues to deal with, which would be the simplest solution. I mean, I don't know if it's feasible from a business point of view because I don't know what the use is, but if it were, then it's pretty much outside the domain of anything we're concerned about.
how are your phones, Michael? How are they?
we don't actually have any phones. The phone lines are all there, obviously, but we don't use landlines there anymore. And the usage is really minimal. I mean, what we do a lot of is uploading large, video files, not video so much, but, picture files and things. It's basically for email and also for the Historical Commission, when God willing, we're back together again. We meet monthly there. And actually not only the commission, but Trails meets there, Selectmen occasionally meet there. So conservation is met there. We're kind of the overflow space. So, it's essentially just to be able to do presentations and to send emails and, there's nothing, we're not doing movie production. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and even a Wi-Fi access point typically comes with a couple of ports on the back of it, basically a mini internal switch. So that should be perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agreed, Larry. I think we could save. I don't know why quoted out a full switch. I mean, that's the standard stock thing they do everywhere.
If this were a real business building, then we'd want, potentially a switch. We might want multiple domains. We might want a guest Wi-Fi and a non-guest Wi-Fi. I mean, I could easily spend $1,200 on a solution, but it just doesn't strike me that that's necessarily the right solution for this application.
Yeah.
Once again, what about the security of the workstations? Are we satisfied that those workstations are sufficiently bulletproof so that they couldn't be hacked?
Are there workstations or is
Yeah.
it people bring their own laptops for meetings?
No, we have several iMac, fairly modern iMacs within the last couple of years, and people do bring their own. We currently have both a internal, it's not the right term, but a company network, and then a guest network as well. That we try to keep the guests on the guest portal, and we use the main one. But there's only two, and we have a laser printer, and it's precisely what it is. It's a very low use, but when it's used, it's critically used access point.
So you do have two SSIDs, is that correct? Sort of an internal.
Yeah, exactly. I believe actually there's three. One that we don't use. I believe the modem can be set up that way, but there's a public Wi-Fi, and then there's a secondary one that the computers actually work on. Pretty basic though. Excuse me.
You don't have any need to get connectivity back to like apart from internet connection. You don't today have any sort of VPN or connectivity back to the townhouse, correct?
Oh, no, nothing at all. The other critical factor is that the wireless network actually maintains the security in the building. So the fire alarm, all that stuff is done through the internet. And the spectrum is unreliable in terms of that aspect. So, that was the other factor, is to try to, get this thing sort of settled out in a reasonably cost-effective way. When I looked at this price estimate, to me, even as a layman, I thought it seems like overkill for what we're trying to do. What we've often done is just set up wireless hotpoints from iPhone. If we have to. Anyway, so that's where we are on that.
Okay, so to me, it sounds like we need to just have somebody volunteer, and whoever's interested in doing it, I'm happy doing it, or Larry or whoever. Basically do assessment of the situation and possibly just spec out, whatever materials we need. I'd love to know whether those fibers are terminated. I'm guessing the fibers are not terminated right now. So that's probably part of the cost.
I'm not quite sure what that means, but if it means they're just hanging in a box on the wall, that's kind of yes. It says AT&T wireless and a little box on the wall, or AT&T fiber optic.
Are there connectors on them? Or
I don't know. That I don't know.
Yeah,
but I can get you pictures of that, and I'm happy to meet anyone over at the museum at any time that you guys want to do this at a social distant thing. Although I will say I got my first vaccination, so we're getting there. So to take a look or get pictures to show you sort of what we're up against. I actually think there was internet connection there previously, frankly, when they ran those cables, and when the recreation department left and it was converted to the museum entirely, that went away. But don't know.
If they previously used the fiber, then it definitely could. Probably has ends on it. So yeah, if you could take pictures and send them, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Larry, is this something you want to, are interested in spending a little bit of time on, or?
I would be happy to, but we're going to be traveling to see kids over the next month or so, and we're not going to be home a whole lot.
Okay. I could do it unless.
Now that we've been vaccinated, we're going to take the opportunity to actually go see them after
take advantage of the cheap flights.
long time. So otherwise, I'd be happy to, but.
Yeah. Mr. Litt made a couple comments in chats, one of which is if the fiber is owned by AT&T, it may not be available. It may have been a leased line fiber that we've spent no longer leasing, but it's something we can definitely look into. Luckily, hopefully we have within the next month, within the next couple of weeks, if not month, we'll have a replacement for Mr. Laflamme, and he can help with these types of things as well, obviously.
That would be great, because as I said, this has been bleeding thousands of dollars over the years, and it's just so wasteful. And as I say, we don't even need a town budget to do this. If it's within this budget, we have the money to pay for it privately. So all we just need to do is get it done.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
If nobody ends up doing anything before about April 15th, then I'll be around for a few weeks for the latter half of April, and I'd be happy to go down and poke around and take some pictures and investigate and see if I can figure out, where the two ends of the fiber are and things like that. So, let's, if somebody does it before then, great. But if not, then around the middle of April, I'll be around to do that.
Okay. Before then, let me see if I probably have time and can help you, Michael. All right, that was the first thing. I know
That
we
was
all have a few
that was
minutes
the
left.
easy question.
That was
Okay.
that was the
Now
hard
let's go to the really difficult question. Can I share my screen with you, please?
one. Sure. 1 second. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, let's see here. Here we are, share screen. Now let's just choose which screen to share, shall we? Let's see here. Firefox profile dashboard. There we go. Share. Okay. Can you guys see what I'm seeing here? Which is, so here's just the background on this. Over the last 2 years, over the last year, we've lost two very important historical structures because of the unbelievable amount of problems with the online process, building permit process through Viewpoint. Our portion of this is very small in the sense, the Historical Commission's portion, in the sense that we're only concerned with buildings that were built after 1925 that, or before 1925 that, fall into a very narrow category of buildings that are on a historically appropriate list. But just in general, this whole permitting system allows for simultaneous pulling of demolition and building permits. None of the information it's all user reliant on the information. I'll take you through this. As an example, at our last meeting, I actually pulled a permit to try to demolish the town hall. And oh, I kid you not. Now, granted, it would have to get to the building inspector, and they may or may not recognize it, but I guarantee you that I can pull a building or demolition permit on any one of your houses as long as I have the address, because there's no demand that the person filing the permit actually is the resident or owner. So there's just all sorts of problems with this. And so let me just show you a little bit of it. So, it has the usual thing. Now, this is done on Viewpoint, and my understanding is that this system is infinitely customizable. It was set up previously by whoever set this up, and it has not been modified since. And the good folks at the building department don't really know how to change it, other than to make small changes to the individual forms. There's no sitemap for this whole process, so no one actually knows when you click all these various buttons what paths you go where. And some of them lead you to 404 pages. Some of them get you back to, redundant questions. Anyway, so you fill out all this stuff fine. You add in whatever details you want. And so here I am. I'm Michael Weisson. I'm going to apply for a building permit at the town hall, okay? It allows me to input any data I want. I can just change location and, I don't know, I can, put in, I don't know, let's put in 10 Main Street or whatever I want to do. If that's a real address, it'll pull it up. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's demolish this person's house. It's fine. Anyway, so let's not do this. So let's go back. And so that's the problem. So instead of pulling from the assessor's actual, well, now I've actually undone it. So I guess I have to go back to 17 Common Street. Oh, we are. Let's choose the townhouse. So property owner information, I really don't have to fill this out at all. Generally, it doesn't allow you to have you fill out much, which is also an issue. So you can skip all these phases. Rather than determining the use and occupancy via the assessor's records, it allows you to freely input all this thing. So I'm just going to call the townhouse a residential home. Now here on this project info, I get to enter whatever information I want. Disposal facility. Now we have a list of real disposal facilities that are licensed, but I've just entered all this whatever. Let's enter some more.
Total elimination of ugly Victorian roof.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say I want to build a sort of Louvre type of pyramid, glass pyramid on the top of the on top of.
We want that. We want
yeah.
that. Yes.
Yes, just as a little garden recreation spot. So post COVID, we can all have a nice drink. Probably could get a liquor license for it if I wanted. So it answers all these questions, which if you ask them, differently at some point or another, it'll say, okay, if it says pool, no. If it's yes, then go to the swimming pool application. Okay, that's fine. But again, this data is all user.
It's user input, self-attestation, doesn't pull from any other system. It doesn't, there's no validation or verification of the
No,
information.
not at all. But here's our huge problem. I can input any year that this thing was built, and if it's before 1925, it doesn't trigger any notification to us. So on 15 Middle Road, for instance, there's another issue that there's really no definition between demolition permits and building permits, and sometimes demolition is within building and sometimes demolition is separate. So they were able to go through the entire process where they clearly were going to demolish the structure, had submitted plans to demolish the structure, got approval to demolish the structure, but didn't click demolition on this form. So we were never notified and the building was destroyed. The folks at 45 Highland actually got simultaneous building and demolition permits, and then in the process of trying to demolish this themselves, actually collapsed the entire building and it was destroyed. Which is another issue we'll bring up, but this to us is critical. I mean,
Does the person filling out the form actually put that date in there?
no, I put it,
I'm saying
Yes.
that.
Yeah, the
that
person
doesn't
who-
come up-
yeah. I mean, you can put in any date you want, and there's no verification at all.
That also sounds like a problem.
Yeah, and what I kept saying, when I talked to the folks at the building department, who are very well intentioned, by the way, they said, well, we've asked the assessors to try to work on this many times, and the systems don't talk to each other. And I said, well, why can't this just pull from like an Excel spreadsheet? I mean, I don't think the software has to talk to each other, but this system, as far as I understand this viewpoint, is designed to pull off databases. And at some point, it does actually pull off contractors if you say you want a contractor. So it looks for licensed contractors and architects. So it has some ability to do this. I don't know very well. Anyway, so I said no. I can put in any values I want here. Now, granted, they come to audit this at the end, so it doesn't really matter what values I put in. But so here's the other great thing. If you claim you're a property owner, you are exempted from all the other controls that you would have here, architect, construction supervisor, whatever. Now, under Mass General Law, you can function as your own building contractor. But in this system, if you function as your own building contractor, you get to skip all the other requirements. So there's no real verification of this, and there's no verification of the data. And this is what, when we wrote to them, there was some heated language exchanged about this with the building department, between the commission and the building department, because they said to us, it's not our job to verify these facts. People lie to get whatever they want on permits. And I said, then you have to have enough questions so you can catch them in those lies. And there's not enough verification of this. So I'm going to pretend I'm the property owner of the townhouse. And so there I go. So, and here again, it asks me for the type of improvement, which lists demolition, but I don't say that. If I say it's not demolition, let's put it in, I'll call it an addition. Non-residential use. I don't think I have to even fill that out. Proposed use. I don't know. Let's say porch deck, because I'm going to build my giant pyramid on the roof. Use group, don't even care about that. Are you the property owner? Yeah, of course I am, because I'm saying I am. And then I waive all these rights, which if you don't actually do this, you can get into huge trouble about OSHA, workman's compensation and stuff. But it just allows you on any property in town to claim you're the owner or owner of record and do whatever you want. I'm the homeowner doing all the work myself. And now again, it asks about demolition, which should be a trigger as opposed to building. But I just say, change it to addition, because I get to call it whatever I want. As opposed to the strict historical commission definition of demolition, which is more than 25% alteration to any street facade. That's our definition. So, but this doesn't reflect any of that at all. And I'm just saying I have a workman's comp. I get to miss the setbacks because it doesn't force me to do this. I say I'm going to do all this stuff on this checklist. I didn't digitally sign. this is for an amendment, which is not the thing. So then I upload these attachments. Again, not all of these attachments, a lot of this stuff is not required. So you can essentially do whatever you want without, if you claim you're a homeowner, for instance, you don't need even architectural plans or a certified plot plan. So in any event, I won't take you through this more because this is about the end, and then it eventually says, do you want to submit this thing? Which I'm just going to save, draft, and exit. But you can see from our perspective, this is danger on wheels, because the inability of this to pull real data from the town allows people to come in and apply for permits, which they may or may not be able to get. We've had several people come to apply for demolition permits who are not the legal owners of the property or have legal representation. And these questions, could and should be asked. But the most critical factor for us, and if all of this stuff is extraneous to the problem, the one thing that we would ask is that the date be filled in from the records. Because that then would trigger automatically, because we have people arguing too about the dates. They say, oh, well, it's actually 1931. It's like, well, that's not what it says in the assessor's office. So from our perspective, I mean, I've alerted the selectmen about this. They know this. They're waiting for the new IT folks. But from our perspective, the critical factor here is to get the assessor's data so that we are identifying, the owner of the property, of the parcel, and the date. And if nothing else happens, that's too bad, but that would be great for us. But it's really scary. I mean, we've lost two hugely important buildings. One is being reconstructed. The other one is lost for good, the Margaret Neary barn, as in Neary School barn. And once these things go down, they can't come back. So even if they're reconstructed, they're still not the same. So, to the degree that you guys can help us tighten this up, the building department folks, I think, would be hugely happy. I know they would be, to be able to get some input. They're very stressed about this, that they don't know, one of the problems is that they don't know where clicking each one of these buttons takes you on all these myriad forms, because some of it gets to dead ends. Some of it gets you back again. You're going for a building permit and it keeps asking you, is this for a fence? Is this for a fence? So it's a problem. And one of the things I suggested was looking at other towns, how they handle this, because to my knowledge, they haven't demolished any historic structures in Northborough that weren't supposed to be demolished. So this is a huge problem for us. And I would be happy. I mean, I don't know the solution to any of this, except that
it sounds like this is an integration, software customization integration issue. That's yeah. So I think
and that's all I have to say about it. But I mean, to the degree that you guys can do and make any improvements in this, especially with the date, we would be hugely grateful, as would the historic fabric of the town of Southborough.
okay.
Matt, it looks
quick
like this is a
question.
SaaS-based solution. I mean, this is a cloud-based solution that maybe we just haven't integrated and configured appropriately. Does anyone have like the vendor contact information to understand what's included in our contract and whether they could actually do that work for us?
I certainly don't know. I mean, this is a viewpoint.
I'm guessing this is something, I know that Tom brought Viewpoint in. They changed over to this new permitting system about a year and a half ago. Is that right?
About that.
Seems to be quite common with a lot of towns that they're using this Viewpoint online system.
So yeah, we that's something we can look into. Hopefully we'll get the new IT person here on staff, but in the meantime, we can possibly start looking into documentation for Viewpoint itself. And
a quick question. Your interest is just, you want to know the buildings that are historically important, whether or not someone's going to do something to them, right?
Yes, exactly. So
you don't really care about the demolish permit or the
we do.
whatever other permits that there are. You only care about that somebody checks those two, or checks a list of the historically interesting buildings, and just makes certain that a new permit is not affecting them.
Well, I would say that it would be that simple, except that there's a kink in this, in that there is a whole, and I didn't take you through the front page, you, the user, get to choose whether the permit is building or demolition. Now, almost all construction involves some level of demolition. You are encouraged by the process to choose building versus demolition. And if you choose building, and even if the date is correct, this doesn't come to us. Because
yes, I understand that, but I mean, what you really want to know is somebody planning to affect this building, either to add onto it or to demolish something, you know, maybe demolish it or demolish something close to it.
Yeah, at the most basic level, that's what we want, an automatic notification system that says a permit has been pulled on this building. Take a quick look at it and make some sort of, you know, decision.
That could just be a batch job that runs every night.
Yeah, technically it should be doable. I mean, this is.
In the meantime, I mean, I'm assuming that when he hits submit on this permit, it gets in front of some human being who looks at it and has to approve it, correct?
Yes, it goes to the building commissioner. Now, I've created a silly example here at 17 Common Street, obviously, but in long discussions with the building department, they don't verify the data. They just verify the procedure. So if it meets the smell test for them, the specifics are not important. And that's how we lost these buildings, because the person in 45 Highland did not say what they were going to do with this, said they were going to do limited demolition when it turned out to be wasn't. But more importantly, on this 15 Middle Road barn, they actually checked building and did everything correct, every single thing. And the building department didn't notice, although they had this for a year, that the plans clearly called for the demolition of this historic barn. But because that one little checkbox wasn't checked, the barn came down.
And so I assume, based on what you said earlier, that you have a spreadsheet of some sort of interesting addresses in town?
Yes, we do. But the general cutoff date, you know, we're willing just to say anything built between 1925, rather than refer to the list, because the list is now 20 years out of date, and it would require about a $25,000 upkeeping.
The problem is that, at least based on the form you showed me, it's the person pulling the permit that actually puts the year in. So it seems like it would be really easy to say 1927 just to avoid any hassle.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the problem.
Whereas if you look at 45, whatever the address was, 45 Highland was on the list, then in theory, the only thing that needs to be done is, if the building inspector sees any permit for anything on this list, then it needs historical department, historical commission approval. And that way, you know, it doesn't get by you.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you'd like this all to be automated, and I'm not trying to avoid that, but in the short term, you know, if you're worried about buildings coming down, it seems to me in the short term, the easiest thing to say is, here's a list of addresses. If you see any permit for any of these addresses, we'd like to be notified before you approve the permit. And,
well, we've tried that. You know, I don't want to go too deeply into the problems involved.
That's fine.
But I would appreciate if you would take my assurance that we do need to automate at least the date function from the assessor's records, because A, people do and have lied, and B, the list is not, you know, it's not been maintained in the way it should be, and where it's a state controlled list, we have no control over it. So so the real factor that we have, the one really accurate record, and the assessor's records are remarkably accurate for the building dates. If this thing could tap into this and trigger a red flag, you know, then we would handle it, whether it's demolition or building or whatever. That to us is just the simplest fix. The rest of all this, I think, is internal to the building department. But to us, we also want to know whether the person is the owner of record and have that verified in some sort of way. Because, you know, we've literally had people come to us and say, we want to get a demolition permit for this, and you're not the legal owner, or the legal owner's representative. So, you know,
So yeah, you're asking for, I think this is pretty good. You're asking for three things, right? You're asking for it pulled from the assessors for the date billed, pulled from the assessors records on property owner, and then if anything is touching any building, construction, demolition, anything built before 1925 with that information, then you want to get notification.
that's exactly it. That's
Okay.
exactly it.
It's something we can look into, and Mr. Litt has posted online that, hey, the assessor information is online. Even if we're not online, we should be able to get a copy of it. And this is an integration issue, and this is something definitely should be doable. We can definitely investigate this.
Fantastic. I won't take up any more of your time, and I want to thank you so much for helping us, because this is you know, as we have a limited supply of these structures, and we really want to make sure to whatever we can do, we've done. So a huge appreciation.
I have a question before you go.
Okay.
How many times a year do people touch a historic building?
Quite a lot.
Okay.
I mean, 20, 30 times a year, probably. Most of it's superficial, painting, siding, things with roof, you know, then we just look at the stuff and said, not our scope, right? Technically, we shouldn't even have to do that. I mean, ideally, you know, we have a very, you know, list of triage points. You know, if it's not siding, it's not painting, it's not this, it's not that, you know, we don't care. It has to be more than 25% of a street facade. But that has become an issue. So we said, okay, we will take all of these and just sign off on them. But this, the viewpoint system as it currently is construed allows anyone to put in whatever information they want. So essentially have to start over. And what we've decided to do is create actual physical digest and go back. The paper system that we had previous to this was infinitely more accurate because we'd get a piece of paper with this data, which we would then verify, and it would come back and forth. And so we're going to create literally a digest, an Excel spreadsheet, and send this to them for each of these properties with a list of things to do backward and forward until we can get this, you know, really straightened out. A lot of extra work, a lot of inputting data in all sorts of unnecessary steps, but, you know, we're out of solutions in terms of how else to protect these structures when the ability to, you know, put in imaginary data is infinite practically.
Yeah, yeah, it needs to be verified. Okay, yeah. Thank you for your time, Michael.
Very good. Thank you, guys. I so appreciate it. Thank you. And you know, Sam Stivers has said such great things about you all, which is how I got here. And thank you for helping us with this because it really is an important issue. So bye-bye. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Be in touch. All right. Thanks. Okay. Great discussion. Quite unfortunate, obviously. That's due to lack of integrations, and Mr. Litt has given additional comments online saying that he was told different things about integration with other systems, and clearly the system is lacking integration with other systems, and that is a major problem.
You think?
And it's sad. It's unfortunate to lose history because of that. All right, let's go ahead and jump forward in the agenda. On the town technology department staffing, that they're still working through interviewing various candidates. I think they're moving forward with a potential offer for one of those candidates. No information updates from school administration. And I haven't heard anything on public safety. Jeff and I attended a session this past week that was done put on by the local FBI office on attacks against schools and public infrastructure, cyber attacks against schools and public infrastructure. Basically just sharing some statistics. And then the importance of having digital resilience, cyber resiliency plan in place, and doing some common things like we've talked about plenty of times before regarding employee training, doing things like phishing campaigns, etc. Make sure we have endpoint security to detect and hopefully some URL filtering so that when people click on things that they shouldn't, patch this as upfront as possible. So MTC processes, I think we approved the consultant agreement, but I can't remember, and Mr. Litt will have to allow Mr. Litt to talk here. Do we need to have a second vote on a subsequent meeting on that?
You do, because changing the rules of procedure requires vote at 2 meetings. And that was to make sure that, if there was an issue of, someone who cared deeply couldn't make one meeting, we didn't want to lock people out. So you just take the same vote you took last time again, and you're done, finally, at last.
Okay.
I can make and read the motion if you'd like.
That would be wonderful, yeah.
I have a copy of it here.
You can actually just do it, as printed in the just approved minutes.
Right. Well, I've got the minutes in front of me, so I'll just read it. I move to update the MTC rules of procedure as follows. When the MTC opts to engage a consultant, volunteered or paid, a statement of work shall be developed and the corresponding MTC consultant agreement shall be executed. The agreement shall be the latest version approved by town council. Neither credentials nor any confidential information shall be provided to a prospective consultant until the consulting agreement has been executed. A paid consultant agreement shall not be executed by the MTC unless funds are available. A purchase order should be issued to encumber the funds. An MTC vote to engage a consultant authorizes the chair to sign the appropriate consultant agreement on behalf of the MTC. If the chair is unavailable or recused, the secretary or another member designated in the vote may sign. The signer may develop/negotiate the statement of work with the consultant within the scope of the vote. I move that.
I second that. All right, let's go around for a vote. Angela?
Yes.
Will? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Thanks. Larry?
Yes.
And likewise, I vote affirmative. So the agreement is adopted. Thank you. Thanks again, Tim, for all your work on that. It's been a long time coming, I know.
Well, I'm glad it's finally in place.
Yeah. And this is, just in time actually for some volunteer work we'll probably be seeking as part of administering some of these surveys and analyzing the results, etc. So that would be good. All right, let's move on. We've already talked about last time the virtual meeting recordings. I don't think there's any follow-up discussion necessary for that, other than I think we were basically waiting on the new IT person to devise and put in place the retention mechanism, something off of not just leveraging YouTube for the archival, but maintaining our own copy somewhere.
Well, the other thing is to get to the town clerk's office so that you can link the agendas and the minutes to the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Which someone needs to take the item to follow up on.
I'd be happy to take that item. I've been in discussions with Jim regarding the scanning effort and trying to put together a sort of a back of the napkin, basically cost for what it would take to scan all the documents in the basement of the townhouse. So I can follow up with him on that. All right. We're going to swap order here before we do this citizen survey, discuss that. Let's jump into the 5-year strategic tech plan. Angela, do you want to lead that conversation?
So everyone should have a copy of the latest version of the strategic technology plan. This is version 4. It incorporates all of the feedback that we've received on all the interviews that were conducted. It also includes the feedback that we heard from the Board of Selectmen. So at this point, we're planning on freezing the current draft until the survey is complete. Then once we get the feedback back from the survey, obviously we'll do that assessment. We'll look at the input that we're getting from citizens, and then we would make any final alterations to the plan, ideally prior to town meeting, which I believe is slated for like May 22nd. There is a goal to do a short summary of the plan for the town meeting so that we can introduce an overview of the plan for that meeting. I don't know if there's any questions that folks have about the state of the plan right now.
Well, I wouldn't mind a copy. I also would point out that if town meeting is outside, your presentation will likely be without slides.
Yeah. Do you know if that decision's been made yet about inside versus outside?
I haven't heard, but the assumption has pretty much been that it's outside. I mean, I haven't heard of an explicit decision, but when Jim Hegarty has been talking about it, he's been talking about the same vendors as last year and the same costs as last year. And I don't think anyone's ready, given the COVID state, to pull people inside.
Matt, was the draft made public as part of the meeting materials? I'm happy to email it over. I wasn't sure if it was posted.
It was not.
I'll send it via email.
I've always sort of been assuming that we basically file it as part of our meeting minutes, so it's available. I assume that I should have access to our committee's portion of the website, and maybe post these types of things online.
Not that. Heavens.
Yeah, something we'll have to look into, but we definitely can. Happy to share widely. So I reviewed it, and Angela, as I had mentioned, I was going to look at it and do a correlation between the current citizen survey and this. And I think I remember that when we originally drafted both of these, there aren't, none of these metrics really pull from the citizen survey, right? It was meant, I think the goal of the initial version of the citizen survey was to determine what residents' area of interest and focus wanted to be. And then once we, basically learn the desires of the citizens' residents, we can then set a strategy to achieve that through various different metrics. So also, also general things like general satisfaction with town services. We were hoping to use the citizen survey as a baseline, and we can, once we've set a baseline, we can add that to the strategic type plan and work on improving it over time. So I know on page 18 of the survey, it mentions a town employee facing annual satisfaction survey, which is something we also need to work on at a lower priority than the citizen survey. But one of the metrics is we should survey the employees about their own satisfaction with town IT services, and improve, make sure that all IT services facing employees are covered by employee satisfaction survey. Yeah, that's sort of the result of the
Yes.
On the plan, since I haven't seen the latest copy, I would hope that it includes something about making sure that all of our systems are integrated to the maximum extent possible. What we just heard is but one example of places where it hasn't been. So fixing that should clearly be a goal, I think.
Yeah, we talk about the department silos quite a bit, and we talk about breaking down those silos and having more of a shared service model, which includes the integration components, things like that.
I think data and systems
to beef up those components in the plan.
Yeah, so this is I would assume that this is First, customer first vantage point. I think integration is about customers. Clearly, the Historical Commission is a customer, and their interests were not met with this new permitting system, right?
Well,
So-
and neither are the people who apply for a permit, because the system will take you to a place where you shouldn't be.
Yeah, agreed.
Right?
So I mean, I think I would encourage you to be explicit about making sure that data is integrated, and systems have to be separate, that it's cross-checked and cross-fed and input validated and all that stuff. And then
Yeah,
there's sort of a secondary thing that says, the user experience ought to be integrated too.
that one of the aspects of the vantage point change, if I remember correctly, was happening just around the time that our committee started. So if I might be remembering that wrong.
The viewpoint, yeah, the permitting system, it was, yeah.
Viewpoint system. So that's probably closer to 3 years ago. But we were fairly new at that point. But one of the things that we never saw, and I don't know if it ever existed, was any sort of project plan for putting this in place. Because, I mean, you don't know what questions to ask until you've actually seen, some amount of documentation on what's actually being done. And this was all sort of in play at the time. And it was, Tom saying, we're bringing Vantage Point in, it's used by lots of towns, it's good for permitting, there are going to be building departments going to use it, there are probably other places that are going to use it. And we said, oh, that sounds great, let's do that. And the reality is there are probably 50 or 60 questions we should have been in a position to ask. At least we now know this in retrospect based on what we just saw. And I think that one of the things that we need to think about as an advisory committee is sort of an approach and a methodology towards, vetting some of these projects to make sure that some of these issues are addressed.
Well, you're supposed to review plans, and you probably should also have a closeout process for them. I mean, in this particular case, I know that in my usual pushy sort of way, I did ask the question about, does this at least tie to the assessor's database? Does it tie to the, public safety databases? And I think the answer I got, to put it kindly, was aspirational rather than something that turned into reality.
I think, Larry, you were about to say it can. Well, of course it can.
Right.
Will it be?
But the point to Tim's point, though, is, I'm not sure that there was anything really in place for us to review at the time. It was not like somebody put a Gantt chart or a list of issues or a list of topics or whatever in front of us and saying, here's the plan for implementing Viewpoint in Southborough. So, that in itself is a problem because there were lots of knots that weren't tied. And we need...
Agreed. There wasn't any, this is something I think would be useful for us to almost put together as we're going around and assessing the different IT needs of the different departments and their own pet projects, their own pet systems. We can sort of take a step back and say, okay, what are the other departments? What are the consumers of data? Because I never thought about the fact that, hey, the permitting system, there needs to be a link to the assessors, or there needs to be a link to the Historical Commission and their key user personas. So the plan that we have here, being a customer first vantage point, the first point in making in customer first means who the customers are, and identifying those customers and the customer journeys for each of the technology system is pretty important for us to document. Yeah.
Maybe this is calling for us to put together a project questionnaire with at least the 10 or 15 important questions. Who is the customer, or who are the customers? What's the purpose of the system? Are there compatibility issues with other systems? Is this replacing an existing system? What databases will it be connecting to on day one? which ones won't it be connecting to that it should be connecting to on day one. I mean, we could probably come up with 15 or 20 questions that we could ask any department, the police department, the fire department, the IT department, about almost any technology project, and at least have some belief we've done a little bit of due diligence on that project.
Yeah, I agree with both of you on this, but I'll add one thing, which is that the department that owns the data probably doesn't know who all its customers are. So I would bet, for example, that while I thought of the assessors and permits, the assessors department probably wouldn't guess that they would be a source of data for the historical commission. So, I mean, I think you have to look at it from both directions. I mean, it's both who do you think your customers are, but it's also, you know, who do you rely on, or what data do you rely on as you go around to the departments?
Maybe there's another role for our committee, is that when we have been asked to evaluate a project like this and we've asked our questions, one of the things that we do is a blast to all of the department and commission heads with a summary of this project and ask them if they have any concerns or interest, and please get back to us within 1 week or something like that. And that way, because it could be that the building department would have no idea that the historical commission is interested. And the only way to find that out is to send to all commission and department heads, hey, we're putting a new building permit process in place. Do you have any concerns, or does this impact your department or commission in any way? And then, you know, they have the opportunity of saying, yes, this concerns me. I really need to talk about this. So maybe that's another role that the MTC can provide, of basically providing that blast out to the department heads to make sure that everybody's aware of what's happening.
Yeah, this is why the bylaw specifies that anyone who is implementing, enhancing, or discontinuing a service has to bring a plan to you folks. And, you know, there's been some discussion about, well, do you want to do that for de minimis things? And at some point you need to figure out what that threshold is.
Yeah.
And I also think it's time to formalize it and have something that says, you know, gee, you know, even if it's, you know, not a huge project, you know, put a paragraph in an email that tells us, you know, what you're doing, you know, when it'll be done, and, you know, the acceptance criteria that we can look at when it is done.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, you know, NASA spaceflight stuff.
Yeah. Larry, would you have time, no rush on this, but would you have time and be willing to put together a first draft of those simple questions? I love that sort of, here's the template, doesn't matter what the format is, here's the template questions we ask, and then here's like a template email blast we would send to commissions as well as departments, sharing that information, saying, hey, here's the scope of the project, here are the questions we ask about it. Do you have any interest, and additional, basically injecting requirements?
I'd be happy. Sure.
Right, thank you. That's awesome. Okay, let's continue our discussion of this strategic tech plan. Other comments? Have people had a chance to review this? So let's walk through. I'd be interested in the 5-year plan, and timeline. Want to walk us through this and what are sort of your thoughts around these targets, Angela?
Sure. So, I mean, yeah, some of this is still high level until we get, again, kind of the survey results back and we're able to do more of the due diligence work. But the thought process was, in year one, we're actually focusing on creating as well as running the survey for the town. we would get that data back. In the initial draft, we were planning on an annual survey, so something that would be targeted on an annual basis. Once we get the initial results back, then obviously we can use that data to start creating harder concepts around the strategy. So we didn't try to forecast out, too extensively until we actually have at least the first baseline of data back. The other thing, though, that I think goes hand in hand with this is I think what we're starting to talk about, which is it leads into the discussion on the Southborough Youth and Family Services requirements. So, we met with that group the last meeting, and heard about a lot of the different technology challenges that they had. And from that meeting, we took an action to actually document their requirements. So I spent some time with their director, and we talked through all of their individual services. We talked about where they are from a technology perspective today, and then started thinking about what might be some potential technology solutions for them, in the future, possible things that we could do. Ideally, I think, doing that for each of the departments as we're starting to do, that's where we start to see these commonalities. This is where we're going to start to identify where do we have opportunities for shared services, but also who are the data owners for these particular pieces of data, and how do we begin to build the overall architecture that will help with the integration questions that are starting to come up. But there's still, in my opinion, a lot of due diligence that needs to be done at a fairly detailed level with a lot of the departments to capture that information.
I've been involved in several discussions that have touched on HIPAA requirements in the town over the past several months. So in addition to Youth and Family Services, I've identified the health department. The senior center has a nurse, which also has HIPAA information. The ambulance service is to some extent impacted either by HIPAA or by something close to it. And then the personnel records in town hall, because of medical insurance and those claims, also would touch on the same or similar requirements. So it's just an example, and you can add it to your mix if you like.
Thank you.
How does the ambulance service in town work? Is that a private company, or is that?
No, it's part of the fire department.
Okay.
We have paramedics. There are a couple of levels of paramedic. I think they're all at the highest level at this point. So the town equips an ambulance, and that ambulance with trained paramedics responds. There's a separate funding mechanism for it. The services are billed back to insurance companies, and there's all that kind of stuff. So the reason I mentioned the funding is that every time you have an independent fund, you have independent acquisitions going on. And we've got to make sure that that gets brought into the MTC supervision domain.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what software. I'm sure that I'm guessing, the fire department and police use that same. I can't remember the name of the guy.
Yeah, it's the same dispatch. I mean, it's the same people.
Yeah.
It's the same building. It's just economically, it's partitioned off. And also in terms of information, it's partitioned off because, your average, policeman doesn't need to have access to medical records, but your paramedic does, and your non-paramedic firefighter, who might be a volunteer, doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, that's great to know. Thank you, Tim. Angela, does it make sense to walk through the, going back to the earlier agenda item, town IT services, and specifically the context of the youth and family services? Does it make sense to walk through your key findings in this document?
Yeah, that would be great. So maybe if we could just start at the top, Matt. One of the goals was just to put together a simple template that we could use so that as we're talking to the departments, we're capturing the data in the same way. This again is very draft, but it just captures some of the basic information about, which department we're talking to, who the contact is, when the interview was done, who actually did the interview. We captured a little bit of information about the department mission, although they are in a planning process. They're doing a strategic planning process right now, so that might evolve over time. And then who are the various members and what kind of services the department provides, their scope of services. And then if you scroll down.
You might want to have a backlink to the previous interview, date of last interview, the one before this one. Just thinking about chaining through it in the future.
And then we talked through basically the services that they provide, and you can see they fall into a couple different areas. The first service that they provide is counseling services. So this is, they offer mental health counseling directly. They also do mental health assessments, and they will do mental health referrals. And currently they're using a fairly manual based system. So all of the paperwork, the scheduling, going back and forth with people is quite manual. They do use Zoom for one-on-one meetings, and they use, I can't read that. I might have to pull up the screen.
Let me zoom in.
Good. My eyes aren't what they used to be.
Just one cut and paste for you is that HIPAA is HIPAA.
Thank you. All right. They use, the other one they use is doxy.me. And they use that, but it only supports one person at a time. So again, a lot of it is, they're calling people, they're scheduling appointments, the intakes are done via phone. Paperwork is all paper-based. People have to come in to sign documents. So, there's a lot that looks like it could potentially be automated that would be very helpful for them.
Is there a reason why they've chosen to use Doxy.me rather than simply using Zoom? Even for
Zoom was
one-on-one?
for groups, and yeah, the Doxy was for one-on-one. I'm trying to remember exactly what she said at the time.
The issue for them at the time was, based on the discussion we had at the last meeting, was that she had no idea whether Zoom
supported
were HIPAA compliant,
yeah.
Which we told her they were, and we pulled up the pieces, whereas Doxy, since it's used for the healthcare industry, is in fact HIPAA compliant. So they felt more comfortable doing that for the calls where they needed HIPAA compliance.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought you identified a risk of non-town-owned devices.
They do have a couple of staff members that are using their own mobile phones and using Google numbers, but is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought that might want to be in your risks column.
Right, and one of the risks there wasn't the device itself, but the fact that the bills are paid by somebody else and there are telephone numbers on the bills, which is a
privacy issue. Yeah.
Well, there's that, but there's also the security of the devices. Does it have remote erase? Does it have encrypted file systems? Is it password protected? ...
Some of the opportunities, definitely online scheduling systems with notifications. She mentioned that one of the big issues that they have is actually, people canceling, not showing up. There's no real reminder system. Like, I'm sure many of us have appointments today, and every appointment you have, you get a text message that says, "Hey, are you coming? Are you going to show up?" And you respond yes if you're coming, or no, and it helps you with that. They don't have any of that. So the manual work to just confirm and reconfirm people, is obviously quite intensive and time consuming. Online case file management. I think that was the other big one, just being able to basically have a secure place to do their case management and have their notes and have all of that being compliant with the health regulations. Those were all, I think, opportunities that we could help with the youth and family services. And then just go down to the next one, Matt. some of these begin to be repetitive, but you can start to see that they have these certain segments of services, and then the requirements are fairly similar across them. So the next area that they cover is prevention. And this is a lot of marketing that they're doing to create awareness about campaigns that they're running. Could be training, could be panels, could be guest speakers. But essentially there's marketing that needs to be done, flyers that they're creating. They generally will work with the schools to get a lot of the communications out. They advertise via the social media accounts. They share with a lot of the town departments like My Southborough, churches, food pantry. Here, registration is also an issue, and recently they've tried the Zoom registration feature, and they actually found that worked okay for them. So that might be something that could be expanded and used further in the future. They are also starting to do speaking engagements via Zoom. So that's something that they're beginning to engage in, with everything being more virtual. They have used the rec department sign up. They need a little bit more experience using the Zoom registration, but again, it looks fairly promising. And then that did send out an email confirmation for them. So the Zoom registration again was good with some of the notification.
Do you know if are they considering using Zoom registration? By the way, I like Zoom registration. My wife works with Southborough schools, the PTOs, the SOS, and they started using Zoom registration for their efforts. They really like it. Do we know if are they considering using that for case management, including one-on-one interactions for appointments?
She didn't mention that they were, going to use it for that specific, since that's more, I think, again, goes back to, is it compliant with the healthcare regulations and stuff like that? They are using it for more of these public type forums, and it seems promising. If we could guarantee to them that Zoom was compliant with the healthcare regulations, it could be something that could also solve other problems, more for notification, probably not so much the case management. But then the other piece of this is when they get a lot of people that sign up for these, they really want to have a database of emails where they could, whether that's follow up with those folks or, alert them to other types of sessions that are going on. And it sounds like after they've run one event, those emails are not preserved in a way where they can keep them in an ongoing fashion. So that might be another opportunity.
Somebody other one vent, like a shared disk or something that could be used.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably a lot of simple things here that would be very helpful.
OneDrive seemed like a perfectly reasonable solution.
Let's see if we keep going down. Let me see if there's some other stuff. Post-event surveys. And then they also have these programs, and this is where it starts to get fairly complex. They have a number of programs where they're trying to match different program recipients with program donors. And it has to be done in a truly confidential manner. So you can't know who the program recipients are, even if you're a donor. And so they do a lot of very manual matching in order to run these programs. The Project Friend was not as intensive as the one below it, but the first one was Project Friend. They're essentially matching older residents with younger residents, a lot of the same type of needs, marketing, registration, confirming attendance. They actually didn't run this program this year because they didn't believe that it would work well in a virtual format. But once they go back to the in-person, they would have these same types of needs. The one below that is a needs-based program, and it covers the area of financial hardship, the emergency fund. There's a lot of forms that need to be filled out, release agreements. There's not currently any workflow in place. There's a lot of information that they're keeping in the emergency referral form, name, address, need amount. They have to keep a paper file on track. and they have to have receipts for everything. So currently there's a Google Doc that's password protected, which they use to keep track of the status of the request. And then there's a paper file for each individual request. Payments go directly to the vendor. Checks are put in the mail for the vendors. And if you keep going down for a moment, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, you know, OCR and stuff like that, that look like it could be a potential opportunity for fuel assistance is run by the state, so there's not a lot that they can do with that when they essentially have to use the state's program for that. She did not feel that we could really change that, given it's kind of a state program and something that they do directly. And then again, the last few, the birthday, the holiday, these are the ones that are the big mixture of donors versus recipients. And it's quite difficult and complex for them to match all those folks together. So we talked about some things that could be helpful. I don't know if you've ever seen how the food pantry does drives, but they essentially create a big Amazon list and then they advertise it to Southborough residents. And if you're a Southborough resident, you can go out to the Amazon wish list and you can just select different things and they get mailed directly to the food pantry. There might be some opportunities like that, as opposed to having all of these different individuals all go buy gifts and then bring them to a big staging room where they go and match them with folks. So there's probably some different things that we could do that might help them with how they're streamlining the overall process. But you know, quite a lot that they're doing here, certainly, and quite a lot of really good programs that are really benefiting the community. There's a camp one, and again, it's a lot of matching people with opportunities. You know, when are people available? What is the camp offering? What kind of opportunity are people looking for? So there wasn't anything that just struck me automatically that was like a great matching software, but maybe you guys are familiar with certain things that I haven't run across. But that was kind of what they were doing in those instances, was matching groups up. And then the workshop and training goes back to what we talked about before. It's a lot of marketing, a lot of advertising, a lot of registration, a lot of follow-up, and then the idea that you could have like an event registration, event survey after the fact for those programs.
So schools use a lot of matching software when they're scheduling people for courses, you know, with wait lists and limited capacity and all that sort of thing. So that might be an area to look.
Using, Tim?
It's been a long time. I was involved in that in the 70s.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's highly specific to
but at least the
course
domain may help you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Angela, this matching is really a fairly intelligent kind of matching, in the sense that they're looking at multiple attributes on each side before they say, okay, this is a match.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but the schools do that, and you know, medical schools do that when they try and assign people to residencies. Even high schools and colleges do it when they're trying to, you know, figure out, you know, for a limited resource of, you know, slots in a course. You know, you look at someone's major because this may be more important at this time for that person, and who came first, and you know, all that kind of stuff goes in. So I know that kind of software exists. One other thought on the case management software, the flip side of case management is getting data out of multiple cases. So, I mean, you would like to make sure that you know, not only is stuff coded for the insurance companies, but you might want to look and see what are the trends, you know, instead of having people write down how they spend their time, it sure would be nice if they could pull it out of the case management software, you know, anonymized properly. So you could say, gosh, you know, we're spending more time on financial counseling than we are on psychiatric counseling. So we should adjust our resources appropriately.
Absolutely.
And also we can argue for our budget better.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see what else, if there was anything else. And just, I guess, going back to the matching for a second, I mean, obviously confidentiality was a big part of that. So often you can't even know who you get matched with. You know, it's important to maintain the confidentiality of the people that are in the program. So there was a lot of aspects, again, around just keeping that data confidential. Even though you match with somebody, you might not be able to, you know, want to let the person know who they've matched with. So I think that's some stuff that we could continue to look into. And the next step with this is, I think, to kind of do a version 2, which is doing a little bit more research on what some of the viable opportunities could be. And then going back to that group, having them do another validation of this just to make sure that we're on the right track. And then we've got to essentially cost and estimate out what the work involved in these would be, so that we can figure out then the funding and the resources and things that would be necessary in order to get something implemented.
Yeah, I know I keep poking at things, but this is a really great start, and it was a nice job.
Thank you.
Pretty impressive. I had no idea that they do all this. And
yeah, it's amazing.
Clearly there's a lot of needs and a lot of opportunity for improvement, I think, on technology that could possibly really help them.
Angela, how long did it take you to in interviews?
It wasn't a long time. I mean, I talked to her about the strategy. So we had an initial conversation that was about an hour when we talked about the strategy for the first interview. And then she came to our technology meeting, which was kind of an outshoot of the strategy conversation, you know, we had. So then there was that time that we spent with her during the MTC. And then I spent about another, it's like an hour and a half with her on the phone, you know, really kind of honing in on this data, but then also using some of the notes from our first interview. So maybe, you know, 3 or 4 hours in total just to get this documented. So, you know, there's certainly more that can be done, but I mean, this was probably 3 or 4 hours at the time.
You know, you talk about a lot of simple things that could be done to help these people, and probably would be extremely effective to do. And I just wonder, how much time would that take an IT person to do it? I mean, they'd have to sit with the users quite a bit. So where would this labor come from?
I assume that it would have to be one of the IT resources that we're hiring for the town. So ideally, if we could hand them something though that was more packaged, maybe it would save them from having to do like all of the, you know, they wouldn't have to spend those 3 or 4 hours doing the interviews and coming up with this. You know, maybe we could hand them something a little bit more packaged so that they could really focus on the implementation components.
There's no application development in any of the job descriptions. I mean, everything that's come out so far is purely, you know, sustaining. If you look at other towns, they have application, you know, development and implementation people. That hasn't been in the town's plan, despite, you know,
and that
requests.
that would include a lack of knowledge about matching systems, right?
Yeah, well, I've always said, you know, what the town is lacking is systems people more than individuals. For some of these things, you know, assuming, you know, you can provide anonymized, you know, sample data, it's the kind of thing that you could do as a senior project for a computer class in high school, or, you know, even college level people who could do it for credit, you know, as a co-op kind of project.
Yeah, and they just administer it within the town. I mean,
But
ideally,
you have to have someone who can define the requirements, and you need to have a mentor to supervise and ensure that the right things happen.
Some of these things, though, I think could be done via low cost or minimal cost SaaS services, where it's administered, you know, by somebody else. These problems, Southborough is not unique. Other towns have had these problems before. Other entities have these problems before, and if it's been solved before and being run, then it can be handled with minimal budget or no budget. Then certainly we should take advantage of that. So I think what Angela is saying, I completely agree with. We could basically hand this sort of on a silver platter to IT folks by saying, here's the problem. Here's one or two solutions that can help. It's easy to administer. It's a fully, baked SaaS service. It's already been baked to use for these use cases. There's online documents for how to use it, how to administer it, and something we can help with as well. So
I'm not saying write software when I say we don't have an application development staff. I'm saying we don't have the staff to go off and research all these options. We don't have the staff. We might barely have the staff to supervise, one or two of these at a
Yeah,
time.
and
It's
on
more
the
like-
permitting system, we never had the staff to go off and handle all these integrations and data consistency issues.
It's more like a solutions development than a software development.
Yeah,
problem.
I would agree with characterizing it that way, Larry.
Yeah. But this is something that MTC can help with. It's not necessarily developing an entire solution, but I think we can at least provide some guidance. And I think indefinitely the town will be understaffed, underfunded for technology needs. It's the nature of a small town. But we do the best we can with the resources we have.
But I think it's also important to use these opportunities to gather the requirements and make the case, that we're not asking for people to come in and sacrifice their lives to work for the town in order to get things done.
Yeah.
I mean,
Also, when we can make the case that by investing in, let's say, an online scheduling system, it doesn't just benefit one department, but there's 5 departments out there that, would have bought their own, and, we're just making one central purchase, even though it might, be we need to buy good software, we need to buy real software, not just freeware type stuff to run the town. And, I think we can build a business case that makes sense, that's worth investing in when we can show how many groups would benefit from it.
Agreed.
But one, I'd say one caveat to that. I remember when the permitting system was originally mentioned by Tom, the thought was it was going to be used by a number of different departments. And to tell you the truth, it sounds like it has made things worse than the paper system. So that's something that can happen. You can come in and bring in the very best tool, but if you don't then work through with the people, how to keep it up and make it usable and important and correct, then you may have made things worse.
I agree, but I also should point out, we haven't heard from all the departments, because the fire department was using this for burn permits. We haven't heard how it's worked for them, positive or negative. And
but the feedback I've heard, and I can't remember whether I've asked the fire department, but other departments, talking to the building department, they seem to like it. So it may have made some people's lives worse, others better. But yeah, that's our goal. Like we should have a good feel for and be able to talk to each of these departments, understand what the software they need and how it's going with that software. So, yeah. Okay.
On a side issue, by the way, I really like this template as a way of capturing information about departments. The columns there, I thought that provided a really good structure, and is probably more broad, is clearly more broadly applicable than just youth and family services.
Yeah, I think it applies to every department. In fact, I really like the idea of possibly taking this template and having somebody interview a department head prior to our meeting, so they can actually, you can have a structured sort of prime the pump as opposed to come in cold, in our meetings, and within 30 minutes try to come up with some ideas. But this is a great foundation. So any thoughts on that? Basically trying to do that in the future for future meetings is basically fill out this template, have somebody on MPC fill out this template, interview the department head prior to meeting with the department head.
I mean, it sounds like, given that we're meeting department heads almost every month, it sounds like it's at least worth a try to see if it facilitates the discussion during the meeting, and also gives us it gives us a written record, in essence, of what we know about the technology use in that department.
Yeah. Okay, so that being said, we want to consider scheduling, do you have any volunteers for what, or any recommendations for what department we should target next? And any volunteers for um, doing this interview process with that next
I would
department?
say fire or police.
We did fire other, I know we had fire and police last fall or last summer. We can certainly swing back around to them, and we definitely need to do the same process with them, this formal process. Are there other departments that haven't touched it?
Have we done DPW yet? I don't remember Karen being here.
I've reached out to Karen. And I need to reach out to her again. I didn't talk to Karen directly. I talked to the assistant, and she said she's happy with technology and didn't have much of a desire to chat. So
Okay.
I think I need to build bridges.
Yeah, the health department is in considerable flux at the moment, but once that settles out, there are some real needs there that I mean, even I know about. They're on paper records, 35 millimeter film, stuff in people's heads. Excuse me, as I mentioned, HIPAA.
Laserfish,
I'm sorry.
Laserfish, the old, never mind. That's the old, you use a magnifying thing for film. Anyway.
Oh, yes. Light tables.
Yeah. Okay, so let me pull up. So the health department, we don't have a current head of the health department. Is that correct? Is it
Well, we have a director whose appointment expires at the end of June, and there's a rather major hassle going on around what their budget should be and what resources they should have going forward. And so it's not clear what the staffing will be. The previous director has sort of a partial view, and he's been reduced to very limited hours at this point.
Okay. So it sounds like it is in flux. How about the building and zoning department?
Yeah, we haven't seen them yet.
And given our recent desire to reach out to them and to
Have we talked to the senior center, Matt?
We have not talked to the senior center. The Council on Aging has reached out to me about, I think we've discussed previously very briefly in one of our recent meetings about their interest in, they have a budget, I think $5,000 budget to buy some Chromebooks and do loaners out to various citizens and do some sort of training on technology. So they're interested in help there. So I'm sure they would love to.
I was just wondering with our talk about the survey and, trying to get the survey to reach a lot of people. And we were concerned about maybe some people not being as comfortable with technology. Maybe talking to the senior center might help us strategize how to reach, that target audience.
Okay, so the senior center is run by the Council on Aging. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So maybe we should invite them. I mean, they've already reached out to me, and that actually a couple times. So I'd love to let's plan on doing that.
They gave up on you and they reached out to me.
Did they? So I think it would be, let's plan on inviting them. Does anybody want to plan on reaching out to them and doing this interview? I'd be happy to, because I know they've reached out to me and we need to get back to them. So
I'm happy to help as well with the interview. If you need help with getting it set up and documented and stuff, I can help as well.
Okay. I'll just take your templates, clear it, start filling it in.
I would be happy to help as well, because I've got a qualification that both of you don't.
I was wondering if you were going to go there. So do I, but like I said, I'm going to be sort of out of pocket for about the next month and a half. So
yeah.
Well, just don't create a quorum when you do it.
Oh, yeah, good point.
2's fine, 3's too many.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. So I'll drive that one forward. All right. Anything else we should talk about this document? We're probably pretty good. Thank you again, Angela. This is awesome. This is sort of the baseline for how we move forward. Any further discussion on the strategic tech plan? Okay. In a few minutes we have left, so make sure we have time to briefly discuss the status of the survey and then also schedule time for our next meeting. So let's jump into the survey I sent out, and I can pull it up and we can walk through the changes that were made in the latest draft of the Southborough survey. 1 second. And related to that, yeah, we want to make sure we cover. We'll cover what changes made to the latest draft, and then let's love to turn the time over to Angela to walk us through the plan, the actual plan, as opposed to just a survey. So that's awesome.
The plan for the survey.
The plan for the survey, exactly, which is hugely valuable. All right, so for our recent discussion, I've simplified. Before, the previous draft had some very specific questions provided by the Youth and Family Services. That was more of a deep dive on Youth and Family Services needs, because they were going to do a combined survey with us to drive their strategy. Since then, they've decided to do their own survey. They want it to be even deeper than what we had. And they just wanted to run with their own survey. So I've pulled it back to be more of a generic general satisfaction survey for Youth and Family Services. I think I even added it with the goal of sort of simplifying the survey. I added Youth and Family Services to the section on basically social services, the section on emergency services. So this section has police, fire, and youth and family services. And it's basically just boil it down to satisfaction with availability of services and then the quality of the services. Likewise, I've simplified the public works section a little bit. There was, in the previous version, there was a question around how is the condition of sidewalks in your neighborhood and streets in your neighborhood. And Karen had an interest to say, look, if we're gonna allow people to specify their problems with trees or sidewalks or roads in your particular neighborhood, she wanted to know what neighborhood it is so that she can go investigate. And so there was a question on what streets do you live on? And I think, yeah, I basically eliminated that question, partially due to I'm concerned about anonymity, because we asked some questions at the end about general demographics. And if you have general demographics and you know what street people live on, you maybe do some correlation and reduce the anonymity of the survey results. So plus, I don't think this survey is not meant to be a specific problem reporting mechanism. So people should be reporting potholes through the annual semi-annual, either semi-annual or annual Southborough survey. We should have other mechanisms to do so. This is just a general satisfaction.
Can people
I just
skip
send emails to Karen.
sections?
Sorry, I did a little bit.
Can people skip sections? Like, what would happen if I didn't want to fill out the whole survey, but I felt really strongly about the library? Like, could I go and only fill out the library section and submit it? It's not going to like force me to fill out every section.
There's nothing. Okay. I don't think the only required question is, I think, are you a resident of Southborough? If you answer no, it will say sorry, thank you, but no, thank you. If you say yes, it'll allow you to take the rest of the survey. I don't think any other question is required. This was actually required, yeah. There was a suggestion by Sam Stivers that if we could have some sort of upfront table of table of contents, index, where they can jump to a particular section. And I thought that was really good. So I played around with SurveyMonkey and discovered that good news and bad news. Good news is it can be done with SurveyMonkey with some of their advanced logic, skipping logic. So I can actually put a checkbox up front that they check, here are the sections somebody wants to fill out, and based on this section, it'll launch them to a different page. The bad news is it is a plan that costs SurveyMonkey plan that costs 3 times as much as we're currently paying. We're currently paying like $300 a year, and that bumps us the advanced page skipping logic, or advanced logic, which includes variables and other things. That functionality, it bumps us up to about a $1,100 a year plan. So I decided, for now, let's just maybe we can put some text up front. Yeah.
Well, let me just put in one thing here. That is that when I did the cable TV survey and was using Drupal, it was very easy to have sections which, depending on the person's answer, would be either shown or hidden.
So the Drupal sites that you did, was that on the town website?
I think it still is, yes.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not a hard thing in Drupal. They've got some fairly simple facilities there.
Okay. It's something we can. So I don't think that, apart from the index, that concept of index, I don't think we have any other need for sort of auto skipping logic. There's answers to one section don't necessarily feed into another section, which is what you typically do with some more advanced surveys. So I would consider it a lower, a nice to have, and I'd be interested in moving forward with this as is without that, possibly with some text up front saying, hey, you can skip any sections that you're not interested in filling out. Apart from that,
and you got these questions from each department, so they're not going to be surprised when the survey goes out. They're well aware that we're asking all these questions.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I work with the library on their questions, fire and police on their questions, Department of Public Works. Here's a relative prioritization of these, drag and drop, which priorities are higher priorities. These are all fed to me by Public Works.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is going to, who hasn't been attending meetings, is going to know what the water main on Newton Street means. I mean, I do, but I bet none of you do.
So you probably should add some details about that. In fact, so I've already started. This is sort of the next step. One of the steps of the plan is to do some, POCs or some trial runs. So I sent this out to a couple of friends in Southborough, and one of their responses was exactly that. Like, oh, they said, what are these things? And why are they all above Route 9? Because I live on the south of Route 9. And why don't we get any projects like better sidewalks to the train station or something like that? So, yeah.
Oh God, having a bridge across the train station so that when I walk to my car, I don't have to walk all the way around. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'd settle for not having a telephone pole in the middle of the sidewalk.
That's high on the list too, yes.
All right.
Great.
Sad but true. All right. So I have the current status is I've sent a copy to the Economic Development Commission. For some reason, I had forgotten to run it by them because there are a couple questions at the end on business. Local businesses, these. And so they're going to review, and get back to us on feedback. I think it's pretty much there. There's some minor tweaks to user interface that I think I can do based on the feedback I've received so far. So with that being said, let's quickly jump over to Angela, the project plan. Maybe I can pull that up and then you can walk us through it if that's okay. And we can talk about where we are. I mean, I think some of these things we may have already be complete, which is good, but appreciate you putting this together as well. Okay.
So at the highest level, we divided this up into the survey creation, the survey marketing, the survey analysis, and then just skip down survey results. So at the very beginning, we are in the survey creation phase, collecting the questions from the departments. We've created the questions for technology, verifying that the questions align to the metrics in the strategy, reviewing the survey length and time to complete. We talked about testing with a pilot group just to ensure that it was understandable and people could fill it out online. There were no technical issues, technical glitches. Once we validated that the pilot data is collected and correct, and that the survey will then work at scale, the next piece would be to launch the survey to the public, which again, at a high level, I just estimated that it would run for like 15 days, but obviously that's subject to discussion. And then ultimately our milestone is that the survey creation is complete. Where there starts to be, I think, work that we need to discuss is around the marketing. We need to create a list of key groups to market to. We need to assign owners to those key groups to send out emails. We can draft the email for the owners of those groups to be sending out, creating a flyer that advertises the survey, define locations where we want to put the flyers, contact all of the online portals, My Southborough, the Facebooks, local newspapers, all of those. And then ultimately, once we've done all of that, we've got our marketing complete. And then we'll get the data. Hopefully we get some good a number of people filling out the survey. We need somebody who's going to parse the data, ideally by stakeholder type, maybe age, demographic, location. Again, could talk about what are the types of data and types of results we want to see from the survey. Look at the alignment of the data to some of our key metric questions, and then create a summary of the key data findings. And then we'll take those results and we want to, obviously document those key findings, create the final survey report that we would share with the public, create a couple of briefings for key committees, create 1 to 2 slides or some equivalent for town meeting, and then finally publish the survey findings. And once all that's complete, just wrap it up and close out the survey. So those were the tasks that I could think of. Could be missing stuff, or we could have other things that we want to add here.
Can you just scroll back to the top for just a second? So I guess you want to launch the survey. I mean, based on this plan, at least launch it basically through the month of May.
It was, like if we.
No, I think it's basically, if we're targeting town meeting towards the end of May, it would be no later than May 4th. If we can get out earlier, that would be nice.
Right. Well, I mean, the problem was that if you go to the bottom, you've basically got the analysis done by the 26th of May, and that doesn't.
That's closing. So publish the survey results was before the town meeting. I assumed the town meeting was the 22nd.
But it was also before the survey results were back, right? Because the survey was the 4th through the roughly 19th, if it was 15 days. So I'm not sure how you can have.
Yeah, maybe I linked something incorrectly or something. I can go back and check the days. It's more that the idea is we have everything done before town meeting so that we can present the results at the town meeting. So maybe that first date, I can look at that again and see what it's linked to.
I think we need to get it started sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The goal would be to, I think, get it published like by the end of this month, beginning of next month, to actually get it launched.
Question. I'm just curious how many responses you think we'll ultimately end up with.
No idea.
Okay, well, if it's low, I mean, I guess we'll use town meeting as sort of a way to say, we went and did this and we'd like more participation later,
Yes.
maybe in another try. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
In
you
fact, I
may want to
think-
do it as phase one, phase two, as you guys talked about at the selectmen.
Yeah,
The other thing I couldn't make sense out of is it looks like you launched the survey, that finished, and then we started marketing. So somewhere I think we need the usual graphic depiction of what's going on.
We can put it in a Gantt chart format so that it's
Gantt, PERT,
easier.
whatever your poison.
Okay.
Okay. So
I'm sure it makes sense. I just couldn't visualize it from the order in the spreadsheet.
Yeah,
Okay.
this was more focused, I think, on just the tasks and getting the tasks
Make sure you get
outlined,
the
and
tasks down.
I
Yeah.
can work on the other stuff, I think, as a follow-up to this.
Okay. So, but there are some things. Angela, thanks for putting this together. What can we divide up tonight? I know we have like only a couple minutes left. Very quickly, are there things we should immediately start dividing up in terms of the marketing effort and keying those up? And do we want to get this basically out before our next meeting? Or are we okay waiting till maybe we schedule a meeting at the beginning of April and say, hey, that's going to be our deadline. And then we divide up the marketing efforts.
That feels really tight too.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the marketing stuff's going to take a whole lot of time. I mean, we've got all the departments that we want to advertise to. We said that the Board of Selectmen offered to send out an email to them. So if we just draft something, they could send that out, or Mark Purple could send that out. It's more, are there other outside groups that maybe people are connected to that they would want to personally own and take responsibility for marketing to? Maybe we could each list the groups that we're involved with around the town, and that could even be a starting point.
Yeah. Are there groups that any of us interact with around town?
I mean, I do the Scouts, I do the Southborough Parent Share and Care, the Free Cycling Southborough side. I mean, it's mostly parents groups and stuff like that, but I have some connections into those.
Our connections into the Southborough Organization of Schools, SOS, and PTO. Are there?
The person who attends more boards and committee meetings than I do is Sam Stivers. So if you get him involved,
Sam's already on board.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's a great advocate. Larry, you were going to say something?
No, I was just saying, I know people on the MTC.
We all have to take the survey.
Exactly.
well, it's what Microsoft used to call, eating your own dog food. I mean, you all should.
Yes. Okay, we're sort of running out of time, but yeah, please, let's give it some thoughts. So if it's okay, I'm going to move forward. I'll get feedback from the EDC, and then let's plan on basically starting to, moving forward. So I can work with you, Angela, on walking through this plan. But it's great. Thank you for putting it together. All right. With that being said, let's pull up our calendars and schedule our next meeting. So if town meeting is towards the end of May, it would be nice to have obviously 2 more meetings in preparation, like April meeting and May meeting, towards earlier on in the month. So what do we feel like? So 1, 2, 3. If we meet on the 6th of April, that's 3 weeks out. Alternatively, we do the 13th of April, where people's schedules like those weeks.
What days of the week are those?
Sorry, Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
Okay, great.
I could do either, but the 13th would be better for me because I'll actually be back home from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
13th works for me.
I can do either.
Okay, let's do the 13th. I'll schedule it. Okay, any final thoughts before we wrap up? Thank you, everyone, for your time, as always.
In the minutes.
It's a great, very productive meeting. Any motions to, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, let's do a vote. Larry,
Aye.
Angela,
Aye.
Will,
Aye.
and likewise, I vote affirmative. Thank you, everyone.